what is gluten? It's, we speak about gluten-free, we have gluten-free foods, and it's kind of a buzzword, so to speak.
Yeah.
What actually is gluten, and why is it a problem for some people?
So gluten is a protein. So it's found in dominantly wheat, rye and barley, very controversially in oats. In this country, we still include oats in the mantra of what is gluten containing. Then there's also one that's called triticale, which is a hybrid of wheat and rye. And there are a number of different proteins that make up your total protein. And in wheat, 80% of the total protein is gluten. By comparison, what they're deeming in oats, it's only about 5 to 10%. So it's very, very different. So this gluten protein, in people who have celiac disease, it is ultimately responsible for setting up an immune response in the small intestine. So that means if we eat food, we swallow it down, it goes through the esophagus, goes through the stomach, and then it becomes a liquid and it gets released into the small intestine. So think of that as a garden hose that's wound up inside of you. And it's round, and all the food goes down through the middle of that intestine. And around the intestine, like all the way through it, you've got these finger-like projections. And these finger-like projections are what we call villi. And on these villi, we've got these mechanisms that can help us absorb our food. So imagine this mechanism grabbing the protein in the food as it passes, grabbing the calcium, grabbing the iron, grabbing the zinc, and it pulls it through and puts it into the bloodstream. And then that takes it off to where we need it in the body. So with celiac disease, people are losing those villi. And if you lose that villi, you lose the ability to draw all the nutrients out of the food. And so this can end up with multiple sort of medical conditions that could be an outcome of this throughout the lifespan. And then there's a whole lot of symptoms that can come along with that. And the symptoms are extremely variable. And there are people who have gut-centered symptoms, which meaning it could be things like the nausea, vomiting, pain, wind, bloating, cramping, diarrhea, constipation, and back and forth on any of those things. And they can be incredibly intense. Or you can have people who will get the brain fog, the absolute fatigue. They want to come home and go to bed at 2:00 in the afternoon, or they can't get out of bed until 11:00 in the morning. Migraines, mood swings. There are people who get skin rashes, and the one that's called celiac disease of the skin is dermatitis herpetiformis. So these symptoms that are outside of the gastrointestinal tract are becoming more dominant. So more people these days are thought to have that. So all those symptoms I described can also be experienced by people who we would term as having a non-celiac. I'm going to say wheat sensitivity, not gluten sensitivity. We used to say gluten because we just blamed gluten in wheat for everything. But we now know there's about 4 components that could be a problem. So in these people, they get the exact same intense symptoms. And for them, they also need to avoid or reduce gluten. So there is a difference between the groups. Because people with celiac disease do get this villi damage as well, even if they're not particularly symptomatic, they have to avoid it very strictly because the gluten is going to damage their villi. And so they have to have good nutrient absorption for their foods, which will help them to decrease medical problems that could arise in the future if the villi remain damaged. Whereas people who don't have celiac disease but have all those symptoms, they're avoiding gluten to the level of their symptoms, which means that they can reduce it and live it. It's a different level of avoidance.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Getting Mental podcast. If you like this episode, then you'll love this one here and this one here. Check them out.